Polanski, the rapist, and unlike the rest of the solemn, censorious house, there to sharpen the critical blades, he'd apparently laughed so hard as to have literally fallen from his seat onto the floor. Amid all this baleful intelligence, it came as a superfluous footnote that his relations with his wife, who was also a faculty member, were obscure and chaotic. I was as susceptible to this sort of gossip as anyone else. It impressed itself on me with more permanence than the titles of the texts I was required to read for my first set of graduate courses. And yet, as opposite as they would seem from each other in worth, the salacious gossip and the scholarly imperatives, they were equally thrilling to me, different color threads of the same mantle, that of adulthood. Graduating from college, I'd suddenly found I'd grown up, and graduate school was my Eden, where I named and possessed all the precious first things, even those with a taint, like the villain Brodeur. Eagerly, I absorbed Brodeur's villainous status as I did the rest of the new esoterica. Rents were cheaper off the hill than on. The better grocery store was Friel's, not Mighty Buy. Nicholas Brodeur was a predator, not to mention a sexist, whose continuing presence on campus proved the sorry truth of everything we'd learned in women's studies, and so was gratifying, though most of us wouldn't admit it. But for all my initiate's self-importance about Nicholas Brodeur and the rest, I hadn't been warned of his beauty, which for true initiates went without saying. Consciousness of his beauty, I understood now, thrilled beneath every condemnation. It was the shared secret that lent the condemning its eager subtext. The assembly of hundreds in the stifling hall was for a series of readings by the writing program faculty to fight world hunger. How the funereal poems, or the confusing prose excerpts, each of which was prefaced by long explanations of context, might fight world hunger had not been made clear. Admission had been free, and no one was taking donations. Yet non-attendance at the reading seemed sufficiently aligned with indifference to world hunger that even acid-tongued Casper did not wax sarcastic, and despite the ravishingly gorgeous day outside, the hall was standing room only, its atmosphere a strange combination of stultification and a showy self-regard for the good we were doing. I recognized just a scattering of students here and there, and not many more from the group of performers who took the stage one by one with perhaps a hair too much affectation of reluctant humility or loose-limbed unconcern, alternating these attitudes almost as consistently as they alternated genres, poet, fiction writer, poet, and so on, each at the conclusion of his or her reading giving introduction to the colleague who followed in a wry collegial shorthand which sometimes provoked scattered outbursts of laughter from the knowing concealed in the crowd. Not a word that was read stayed with me. I could not even recall, once the readers were back in their seats, which had read poems versus prose. Affecting a pose of my own, of enchanted absorption, as if the powerful words drew my gaze far beyond the confines of the hall, I very slowly rotated my head toward the back, but the standing room area now was so crowded I could no longer see him. Perhaps he had left. When the reading was over, it was a long time before we could even get out of our seats. "I'm very disappointed Byron and the Bunnyman didn't share his work also," said Casper. "The man standing in back? But he isn't a poet." "What else would he be?" "Something made me think he must be Nicholas Brodeur," I admitted, but Casper pooh-poohed. "Brodeur's a Spencerian," Casper explained. "He'll be Tweedy. Even if he's a rapist, he's going to be Tweedy. You're casting too much to type." Later that week, when I came up the steps at the end of my first day of classes, Dutra was already home, sprawled in the porch hammock with a half-empty bottle of beer. "What an insane day," I complained and exulted. "You obviously need a drink," he said, swinging the bottle at me so I had to accept it. Dutra had a pouncing way of expressing himself, as if the subtext was always, "I gotcha." His voice was generally too loud for its setting, for the porch on this homely